I want to see, since RegisKillbin is better than me at deck building, I want to see his opinion on the new card, so let's watch that video, brother. There we go. We have here a video from RegisKillbin talking about the new cards that are coming this month, that are Nimrod, Kitty Pryde, Negasonic, and Master Mold. Maybe he's going to talk about how to use those cards. I already have a rough idea on how to use them, but I don't have a good deck for Negasonic. Maybe he offers some insight into those, brother. So let's check it out, my dude. Let's check it out.
Well, folks, it's time for another Marvel Snap card review. We got the final confirmation for what the March 2023 cards are going to look like in a recent developer update. I like to wait to get the final word on those developer updates. Sometimes the data mine versions that come out early can get changed over time. But we've got 4 exciting new cards this time around. The Season Pass card Nimrod and a few others that definitely seem to have some really interesting play patterns. Some high complexity, I think, in a couple of these cards. Now, I know with Series 5 cards, it sucks. It's not many people get to play with them. It's really unfortunate. It's a bit...
Yes, at this point, we talk about these cards well because they are coming into the game and we know it, but for some people it's just a dream having these cards. It is an ethereal stuff in there, like a ghost. Nimrod is accessible to all people if you buy the Season Pass, but the other 3 cards are Season 5 bullshit, you know.
Bittersweet to even look at new cards, but I still think it's useful and helpful to have an idea for what's being released and what kind of decks might pop up and the sort of...
And the thing is, you have to be aware of these cards and know what they do because they can be played against you even if you don't care about them. So it is good to know about them, brother.
Things you might expect to play against sometimes, even if you're not playing them yourself. Of course, Marvel Snap needs to make new cards more accessible to people. We've had this conversation 1,000 times. I'll continue to have it, though, because it remains true, and it puts a real damper on the excitement around new cards, I know. That said, we're still going to talk about these so everybody's fully prepared for the stuff that's coming out. Now, our first card for the video, Nimrod, is actually a little bit more accessible because this is going to be the Season Pass card for the month. Exactly. I know a lot more people pick up the Season Pass. Nimrod here is a new 5 energy, 5 power card, and he reads when this is...
And brother, I am grateful that it is the Season Pass card because if you guys remember, I talked about this one before we knew this was a Season Pass card. I told you guys from the data mine cards that this one was one that I wanted, that I feel like it was going to be fun and I wanted to have it. And that I wanted to pay the 6K tokens for Nimrod. So him being a Series 5 card, it is cool for me. For me, it is cool that, not a Series 5, sorry, a Season Pass card. Because now I don't have to pay the 6K tokens for him, and I was going to do it, you know? So when I found out that he was going to be a Season Pass, I was happy because now I don't have to pay the 6K tokens.
This is destroyed, add a copy to each other location. So not particularly exciting here at 5 power at a base level, but of course, if you're destroying this, that's already a 10 total power card for 5. That feels a little bit...
Willing, that was the word I was going for. I was willing to pay the 6K tokens for Nimrod, brother. I was willing to do it, but now it is better for me because I don't have to do it.
Better. And then, of course, if you're destroying this multiple times, then you can create some really crazy cool chains here where Nimrod is getting much larger and stacking his stats across the board, kind of duplicating every single time. And I think there are actually some really interesting ways to do that as well. Think about cards like Galactus, for instance. You could play down a Nimrod on 5 and then actually a surprise Galactus on 6, which currently doesn't ever really work very well because like Galactus and Wolverine aren't big enough usually to take a lane by...
Exactly the build I am going for with Nimrod. So maybe this won't be good enough because now everybody is thinking about the same shit. I was banking on people going for a more mainstream destroy stuff and not thinking about Galactus and going for the mainstream destroy Nimrod, you know, because I want to go for the turn 6 Galactus. But if more people is trying it out, and then people will take against it and they will expect it, and a lot of the power of this deck comes for a turn 6 Galactus should be surprising. But if it isn't surprising, then you lose a bunch of power.
Surprise, but with Nimrod it might be. If you have the Nimrod in the right spot, you could end up with 10 surprise power from Nimrods behind your Galactus, also maybe a 4 power Wolverine. Suddenly you're talking about a 16 power Galactus lane out of nowhere. That could definitely be enough to surprise people sometimes and take the win. And on top of that, of course, is that you can actually scale up the stats of the Nimrod as well. If you play a Shuri into a Nimrod now, he's actually a 10 power Nimrod. So you could have Shuri Nimrod Galactus, and wow, suddenly 2 10 power Nimrods backing up your Galactus, all on the final turn. If your opponent's not ready for that, man, that could actually be a really sneaky way to win. Because that became too meta. Of course, people would start to expect it a little bit, but the thing is, you wouldn't have to commit your whole deck to this like Galactus game plan. You wouldn't necessarily need waves and electros and stuff, so you could maybe just play a good destroy deck or a good Shuri deck with Nimrod in there and give yourself these different surprise angles to go. So I think that could be a possibility for Nimrod. Again, I know, Galactus Series 5 card, sure, not everybody has, I get it, but you get the ideas as far as developing the top end of the meta. Now, of course, I don't think that's the only way to go for Nimrod. There's also, of course, other great destroy synergies for this one. Something like an Arnim Zola basically allows you to kind of double up on the Nimrod effect here, shifting extra Nimrods to the other locations. That's both extra power, but also redistributing stats, perhaps in a surprising way where your opponent's not ready, or you're suddenly shifting into 2 other locations instead. That's pretty sneaky. Other hand buff cards like Nakia as well could be a way to fuel your Nimrod, or a Forge or whatever could get this bigger.
Some people want also to ramp up so they can play something like Arnim Zola earlier and destroy a bunch of stuff and replicate Nimrod a bunch of times.
Too, if you're trying to get some copies out. And then just regular destroy cards probably aren't terrible with this. Something like a Carnage, you need fuel for your Carnage. If you want to play Carnage late in the game, Nimrod's a great way to put a body in there that still has some upside. And then Venom is perhaps an even more interesting example, where you can use this to get some big stats into your Venom, but then not lose the stats, as is the case with many other cards, because Nimrod is shifting into those other spots. So ultimately, just a big destroy fuel sort of card that allows you to shift stats around, get extra stats. I think that's pretty cool. A couple different ways I could see that going. I think it's very likely one of those sticks in a good deck in some fashion or another. It is expensive, right? At 5 energy, this is a card that's coming down later, so you don't have a lot of time to set up for it. Like right now,
Yo, Exoc, my dude, how you doing, brother? How you doing, bro? Electro, Nimrod, Destroyer, then go crazy last turn. Exactly. And you can Arnim Zola, you can Venom, you can do a bunch of stuff.
A lot of destroy decks want to destroy things early and then have the big kind of death wave, death and whatever other card pop off late in the game. Nimrod doesn't really fit.
We are watching a RegisKillbin review of the cards of this month to see what he says about the cards and what decks he sees them working. I am curious about the Negasonic because that is the card that I like the most, and also, well, aside from Nimrod, of course, and because I don't have an idea of in what deck I would put Negasonic in, aside from a control deck or maybe a destroy deck, when you take advantage of Negasonic destroying something for you and also for your opponent, so you are good in either situation. But I don't really know what that would exactly look like, so I am curious if he gives us better ideas, you know.
Fit that play pattern particularly well, because you're going to have to be doing your destroying late in the game, and he's probably going to have to be what you're building around for your power and surprise factor late in the game. So, you know, this doesn't necessarily slot into destroy decks as they currently exist, but I think interesting enough perhaps to inspire a couple different ways to play destroy decks instead, which that's pretty cool, I have to say. I also want to note real quick, we're going to talk about another card in this video, Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which actually might be a sort of preemptive enabler for Nimrod, where you play this down beforehand and then Nimrod on top of the Negasonic Teenage Warhead, which for most of our destroy effects right now in the game, they're happening after the card is played.
Exactly, and that is one way, that is one of the things that everybody talks about, the weakness about Nimrod, that he comes off the 5th turn, so you only have one more turn to trigger the effect, you know. But if you play it after the Negasonic, now you have 2 turns to play the effect without ramping, because you first play the Negasonic and then the Nimrod, and that way you destroy it before the play, let's say it like that, or just on the play. So that is an extra way of triggering Nimrod without having to wait an extra turn. Of course, your opponent can disrupt that if they have initiative by playing a card in the Negasonic lane and destroying it, if they are expecting you to play Nimrod. But these are potential lines of play that are presented for the existence of Negasonic.
They're coming down later. So having a preemptive way to do this does perhaps fix some of that energy awkwardness a little bit, because you might be able to play this on 5 and already have destroyed it and then still do some cool stuff with it on turn 6 possibly as well. So some synergies there to keep an eye on, as well as we'll talk about more we get later in the video. But I think Nimrod's a really cool looking card, and for whatever reason I remember this dude in action figure form. I had like a Nimrod action figure as a kid that I always loved a lot. So also hitting some nostalgia vibes for me here with Nimrod. So very excited to play this one. All right, so next up here we have Kitty Pryde, and this card's kind of complicated. There's a lot going on with this one.
Of course, the bounce deck. You play this with a bounce deck with Beast, Falcon, Collector, Bishop, Angela. This is what you want to do.
And gonna have to break down how we think it works. And I say we because I've got a pretty good idea for this card, and after reading some consensus on Twitter, I think most people agree this is how Kitty Pryde is going to work, although technically still open for interpretation, of course.
Well, maybe this was recorded before, but now the developers answer how she works, and you can get her up to hand and play her again on the same turn. So you can play her on the first turn, and then on the second turn you take her back and you play her again immediately to get the +2 power. So you can do that on the same turn. Maybe he recorded this before they said that, you know.
Kitty Pryde is a 1/0, and it reads, you can return this to your hand to gain +2 power. So what that means is, like, once Kitty Pryde's been played out, you can pull it back and keep it in your hand to get +2 power and then replay it again. Now, there are 2 interpretations there, right? Like, theoretically, you could pull this back every single turn and then immediately replay it within the same turn, and it would get +2 per turn, basically through the first or the final 5 turns of the game, and would be a huge 10 power card. that you
and you are paying one energy for those +2 power each turn. But the thing is that you should be getting more out of that, like buffing a bishop, buffing a collector, buffing an Angela. Maybe your Kitty Pryde is 0 power because you played a beast, so you are taking a lot more out of the ability, brother, than just the +2 power.
spent a total of 6 energy on because you're playing it every single turn. That's an interpretation, but I don't think that's going to be how this works, because really the way Marvel Snap works, if you pull a card back to your hand and then you just replayed it right away, like immediately as your next action, that's like you didn't do anything. You can do that with every card in Marvel Snap in your hand, because that's you deciding not to play it. That is basically the same function as undoing all of your actions. So the consensus agreement so far for Kitty Pryde is
no, but they already confirmed that you can do it. The lead designer of the game confirmed that you can take her back and play her for the +2 power on the same turn on the Discord channel.
is that actually you'll basically need to hit the in turn button to lock in each phase of Kitty Pryde. So what that means functionally is that you play this on turn 1, you hit in turn. She's a 1-0. You pull this back on turn 2, you hit it in turn, she becomes a 1-2. That locks in the action of you having pulled her back, because otherwise you didn't really do anything, right? There's no phase change at all. The in turn signifies the phase change, the locked action, the choice for Kitty Pryde. So then you go into turn 3, you play Kitty Pryde again as a 1-2, right? You hit in turn, she's on board as a 1-2. Then on turn 4, you pull her back again. You hold her in hand on turn 4, you hit in turn, she becomes a 1-4. And then on turn 5, you play her out as a 1-4 again. You hit in turn, she's a 1-4 on board. Theoretically on turn 6, you could pull her back and make her a 1-6 at the end of the turn. That would probably only be good in a Magic deck where you can play her on turn 7. So most of the time, I think she's going to end up as a 4 power card on board on turn 5. And
no, it was a first interpretation, my brother, but it is okay because you didn't know. I am on the future, so I know, but you didn't know, brother.
ultimately, you'll have spent 3 energy on her because you got to play her each time and spend that 1 energy. So basically, a Cyclops stat line here over multiple turns. You're getting kind of a 3-4. Again, that is the expectation for this card, just based on the mechanic.
And the ability to buff other stuff, because that is why you want to bring her back, because you buff the Collector, you buff Bishop, you buff Angela. So in reality, you are getting a lot more points out of this ability.
And functions of Marvel Snap. And a 3-4, of course, is not exciting in its own right. We're not playing Cyclops for the stats, right? It just doesn't make sense. But
then comes Killmonger and just destroys your Kitty Pryde. But at least your Bishop and your Collector are bigger.
of course, the action of replaying these cards does have other benefits and upsides. With cards like Angela and Bishop that scale off cards being played, then having this thing that you can play turn after turn and not occupy board space with it can actually be a beneficial way potentially to scale up some of those buffing cards like Angela and Bishop, which could be nice because sometimes you have board problems with Angela in particular where you can't get your Angela big enough. So it's almost like every time you pull this back, you're getting maybe like +4 or +5 if you consider some of those other buffing cards. And in something like a Zoo deck, you know, you got Kazar in there, and suddenly this 1-drop's getting buffed. It's fueling some of your other scaling cards. That has some intrigue, that has some promise. And it's not really like a 3-4 because you're getting this mana flexibility over time, right? You can actually kind of choose when you're playing this.
And it was confirmed that if you bring her back with Beast reduces her energy cost to 0 permanently for the rest of the game. So you can basically do this for free every turn after you beast the Kitty Pryde.
Buying an entire turn for it or anything. So that extra flexibility might also help in regards to Kitty Pryde. And if your deck is running a bunch of 1-cost cards anyway, you know, a 1-4 is going to be one of the better 1-cost powers you're going to have. Most of them are going to be 1-2, maybe 1-3 if they got some downsides, right? So 1-4 is actually significant, especially if it's buffing other stuff. So I do actually think this kind of makes sense in that Zoo environment. Also because of the fact that you can maybe like play her on turn 6 instead of on turn 5 because you don't really want to pull her back for that final turn 6. You've also got a little bit of flexibility there at the end of the game. For instance, if you want to play a Blue Marvel on turn 5 and you don't feel like playing your Kitty Pryde out, it's okay because you're not going to pull her back on 6 anyway. So you can just hold her on 5 and then play her on 6 and help fill in your curve for one of those big surprising 1-4s on turn 6. I mean, I guess it won't be a surprise because your opponent will have seen it, but a big surprise dump all in total with Kitty Pryde and other cards as well.
I don't know if she's a better Sunspot. She's better than Sunspot for sure in the bounce deck because she buffs other stuff. But Sunspot, you don't have to do shit. You just let the Sunspot be there and he can grow really big. You can not let him grow big. So Sunspot is insane. I don't know if Kitty Pryde is better than Sunspot, but in the bounce deck, she is for sure.
Map that out right. Forgive me if some of them I think I mapped that out right, but a lot of complexity, so forgive me if I said anything wrong or misspoke throughout all of that. There's clearly a lot of detail, and I've already recorded this twice, so we're gonna stick with this one either way. So, you know, I do think specifically in a Zoo deck or something that's
yes, but that happens only once per turn. So for example, if you do it on the 6th turn, you can only spend 1 energy to get 2 power, but the Sunspot you can spend the 6 energy to get 6 power. So it is different.
pretty cool. Outside of that, I don't think most decks are going to value the stat gate on this one nearly enough to be worth it. I just don't see how that's going to make any particular sense. So perhaps a pretty narrow card, but still intriguing within that niche of the Khazar Swarm, Khazar Zoo, Angela Zoo type stuff. Maybe Kitty Pryde does actually make a little sense. So next up here we have Master Mold. This guy looks really cool. A new 2/2 with an on reveal, add 2 Sentinel.
This is one that I am expecting to go for, brother. All 3 cards are good. I want them all 3, brother. And I will probably only have tokens for one of them. So deciding is tough, brother. Deciding is tough. All 3 cards are cool in my eyes.
To your opponent's hand. You probably don't need a recap on Sentinels, but just in case, I've included it there on screen.
You guys know that I decide to buy a card not for its viability or how strong it is, but if I think the card is cool and fun. That is how I decide to spend my 6K tokens. So I expect all 3 cards to be fun at first glance. So, oh brother, I want tokens.
And the idea with this card is twofold, I would say. Number one, filling your opponent's hand. And
I wonder if you pull her back on turn 5, will you be able to play Infinite on turn 6? Or does pulling her back count as like a playable action? I'm sure it doesn't work that way, but it might be buggy like that. If you don't play a card from your hand on the 5th turn, it shouldn't matter if you bring her back. But if you play her back when you bring her back, yes, it would count, right? But if you just bring her back, it shouldn't count. But at that point, you don't need to bring her back because you aren't going to play her, and you will be better playing her on the last turn. If you are planning to do it. But at that point, you don't have the extra energy to play her, and you are going to just play the Infinite. So at that point, you will just let her on the board. So that the scenario shouldn't arise up if you are trying to maximize your points.
Keeping it full can be great for cards like Ronin, the devil dinosaur for your opponent's hand is Ronin. We've already seen some people playing around with Ronin decks with Sandman and certain cards like that. Maximus and Baron Mordo kind of fit in with that package. So this is another way to keep your opponent's hand really full, because they can't really get rid of the Sentinels in most scenarios because they play the Sentinel and another one comes back. So you're making
the
sure
only way is if they are playing a discard deck, well, when they discard the Sentinels. But aside from that, they can get or playing the Sentinel in a nowhere or in a Cosmo lane. That is another way of getting rid of the Sentinels. But aside from that, I can think about a way of getting rid of them.
Few cards are going to be in your opponent's hand basically at all times with these Sentinels, which can also be disruptive for other kinds of decks, like a Dracula deck, for instance, that's trying to rely on a really big hit on an Infinite that they've narrowed their hand down to. You can drop Master Mold and suddenly they've got a Sentinel in their hand, and their Dracula hits a Sentinel, and they're like, oh my god, are you serious? So there's disruption value against specific cards like Dracula. There is enable value for things like Ronin, but I think there's also just a more generalized combo disruption potential here as well, where if your opponent is sitting on a bunch of cards and trying to draw into specific stuff and their hand is getting kind of full. I know we've all played those combo decks where you don't really have much to do until like turn 4 or 5 or something. You got like Shuri, Red Skull, whatever. Well, if they're sitting on a bunch of cards, you play a Master Mold in the mid game, you might just take up their final 2 card spots in hand, and then they can't draw any new cards, and then they might miss out on their big combo piece, their big finisher. It might make it harder for them to find Galactus or whatever it might be. You can imagine lots of future scenarios where opponents are trying to find specific sorts of cards, and instead their hand is clogged up with these garbage Sentinels that they absolutely cannot get rid of.
So for all the people that was crying and whining about Dracula having no counterplay, this is another counterplay. Dracula has counterplay, but this is another counterplay that they are including if you aren't interested in the obvious Ronan ability, you know.
And of course, you can play that with other mill style cards like the Baron Mordos, the Maximuses, and so on if you wanted to try to really tie all of that together. So I do think this card has some pretty interesting lines. It feels weird, of course, to give your opponent resources, and some decks might actually be pretty happy just to get some Sentinels to fill some energy in the early games. Like, hey, yeah, I'll take these, man. And God forbid you play a Cerebro 3 deck that's like, oh yeah, hey, I needed this. That's great. So there are some risks, there are some downsides, but I can absolutely imagine specific scenarios and specific metas where the Master Mold offers some surprising utility because of all those different things. And also, this might be the final thing that makes like a Ronin deck really good. A mill style deck, as we call them in other games, might actually be pretty decent on the back of something like Master Mold. We might finally hit that critical mass where you've got enough of those tools to make the huge Ronin, and then, you know, Mystique to follow it up or whatever, and that's your big 2 power cards with some early game stuff, and that's a deck that could work just okay on the back of the Master Mold. I say just okay, maybe I should say promising, but I don't think it'd be like a tier 1 sort of thing. I actually love the idea of like making multiples of these somehow, copying the Master Molds, and just filling your opponent's hand with only Sentinels so they can't actually draw any of the real cards. Might be kind of hard to do with Moon Girl at 4, but maybe there's some other shenanigans and ways to get multiple Master Molds that completely ruins your opponent's game plan. So a lot of meme potential, a lot of disruption potential makes this card look really fun for me. All right, then our final card for the video here is Negasonic Teenage Warhead, a 3/4, and I do believe this one was data mined as a 3/2 previously, but final version of the reveal video is a 3/4, and it reads, after any card is played here, destroy this card and that card. Now, a couple interesting things to note here. This is any card is played here. It's not after you play a card here. So What that means, based on the wording we have for other cards like Titania, for instance, that means if your opponent plays a card in the same location as Negasonic Teenage Warhead, that will also trigger the effect of this card. So there are really two ways to use this. Number one, you could use this as a sort of preemptive setup like we talked about before, so that you can play something like your Nimrod after your Negasonic Teenage Warhead and immediately activate him, so you might get more total triggers possible for Nimrod, because now you've got one on turn 5, the same turn you're playing him, and then maybe follow-ups on turn 6 as well. And alternatively, you can use Negasonic Teenage Warhead to remove or destroy something of your opponent's preemptively. If you want to like lock down a location and say, hey,
if you're, for example, if you are expecting on the last turn of the game for them to play, I don't know, something big that is common on the game, let's say a null, you are expecting them to play a null, and you have priority. This is like a reverse Shang-Chi, because for Shang-Chi they have to have priority, so they reveal first. But if you have Negasonic and you reveal first, you play Negasonic, and then when they reveal their null, then their null is going to die. So you win the location where you are already winning, you know. So it is kinda to secure the location if you use it that way.
You're going into turn 5 after playing Shuri. I do not want you playing that big Red Skull in the right location or whatever. Then you can plop down a Negasonic Teenage Warhead, and if they want to play the Red Skull, it's going to get destroyed and murdered by Negasonic Teenage Warhead. So that's susceptible to being ruined if they're, you know, not a Shuri Red Skull deck where that lines up perfectly. Plenty of other decks might have something really small and tiny to just play.
And it is cool to notice that this isn't add-on going or add-on reveal. So potentially people are going to complain about this card having no counterplay.
Really quickly, a Thanos Stone, for instance, wipe out your Warhead, waste your 3 energy in effect, and trade off something really small for your Negasonic Teenage Warhead effect. And that's also a risk, of course, if you're trying to use this as a setup play for something like your Nimrod.
But that is the name of the character, you know. What are you going to do? The character is called like that, brother.
Your opponent might just take it out accidentally by playing cards right away, right after your Negasonic Teenage Warhead, depending on reveal orders and such. That could be a risk as well. So this card has a lot of different...
And I believe the stupid thing here is Teenage, because Negasonic Warhead is fucking cool.
Layers and interesting directions to go as that kind of counter disruption card, as a setup card. There are some real mind games with this one, much like with Titania if she comes down early, where it's about like who's playing cards here. Is this the turn they're going to play the Negasonic Teenage Warhead? Do I have to be careful that my card's going to get destroyed right away? There are so many different things to think about how this one's going to take shape. Now, ultimately, I think the effect is just big enough that it's going to be a pretty cool card. I think it's going to be useful for decks to run as that potential disruptor, as a way to kind of protect the location, in essence, limiting your opponent from developing something there on a given turn. That all sounds like it has some neat utility, and it's not like this is a really high cost card for that kind of effect.
I believe this card is
destroy effects or countering style effects like that. We're usually spending a little bit more than 3 energy, but that's of course because this one does come with some risk that your opponent just...
Yo, Soder, how you doing, bro? Because I got the speed of the video up so we can watch it faster. That's my bad, brother.
Negates the effect more or less with something small. So I am really intrigued to see how this card shakes out. I did see Ben Brode also tweeted that this is like his favorite card in Marvel Snap, or one of his most favorite cards in Marvel Snap, probably because of all those layers of complexity and how exactly this card shakes out in play. So I think potentially a really interesting card from a power level standpoint, and a really, really interesting card from a mechanical standpoint. So now it's time for some quick reviews where I rate these cards from 1 to 4 stars. So you guys can come back later and make fun of me when I said a card's gonna be great and it's terrible. Nimrod is a 3-star card.
That is why I try not to talk much about it. You know, I say maybe this is good, maybe this is bad, because you don't really know. You don't know until you play with the shit, brother. So maybe you say, oh, this is... For example, I said that Null was going to be really good, and Null only works on the Galactus deck, you know. And I thought it was going to be overbroken, so I was wrong about that. So it is hard to know how good a card will be before you play it. The only card everybody knew it was going to suck was M'Baku. Everybody knew M'Baku was going to be bad.
So you come back later and make fun of me when I said a card's gonna be great and it's terrible. Nimrod is a 3-star card. Kitty Pryde is a 2-star card. Master Mold is a 2-star card. Negasonic Teenage Warhead is a 4-star card. And there you go, folks.
So he thinks Negasonic is the best of the bunch, then Nimrod, and then Master Mold and Kitty Pryde on the bottom. Yes, I can see that. I can see that. For sure.
That wraps it up. I'm actually really excited to play a lot of these, even though I'm not sure the power levels are super high on some of them. They all just have very neat mechanics, like stuff that's gonna be really fun to try out and see how well it works.
Exactly, that is the cool thing about these cards. They have fun mechanics, brother. Even if they aren't going to be powerful, they have fun mechanics, and that is what I like to see. But it would be cool if we didn't have to pay 6K tokens for this bullshit, because how the fuck are you going to get all 3 cards? You can't. You have to choose one of them, which sucks.
In particular, I love the idea of mill decks, so Master Mold's really fun for me. Negasonic sounds really, really cool. And Nimrod, something about this character, I love it. I don't know. He looks goofy. This is a big pink futuristic Sentinel guy, but just nostalgia vibes, and I like the kind of duplicating effect here. So really looking forward to these. Curious to hear your thoughts on these cards down in the comments below. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.
This was a cool video, RegisKillbin, brother. This was a cool video. I was thinking about him giving more info about a deck to play Negasonic, but that is me looking for something more, you know. But that's on me, you know. Maybe when the time comes, he will show us a good deck for Negasonic, brother. Thank you for the video, RegisKillbin. It is really cool reviewing the cards. We did these two boys for the by the way. Only if they see it coming. Negasonic can be exploited by your opponent to blow her up with a rock. Only if they see it coming and if they have a rock or something like that, you know. Because if you do it on the same turn, maybe they don't know. Like I said, on the last turn, you are expecting them to play something big, a Magneto, a Hulk, an Infinite, a She-Hulk, a Red Hulk, a Red Skull, a Null, and you play it on there, and that shit is going to get destroyed, brother. They can't do anything about it if you have priority, of course.